Happy to be here with my very special guest this week, who just so happens to be celebrating 50 years in the film industry, which is an amazing accomplishment when you look at the ebbs and flows of the film and entertainment industry. My special guest this week is actress Shabana Azmi. Shabana, thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure, Derek.
Fantastic. And we were having a chat before we started. 50 years is amazing. I imagine you've seen a lot of changes and a
Oh,
lot of
yes.
evolution in the film industry in that time.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Some for the good and some for the not so good.
And that's, a lot of life in general. You go with the good and the bad, and but you're still doing it. So that's an amazing accomplishment. Congratulations.
Thank you. What I discovered in my 50th year is what I like doing best is acting. So it's a great feeling that I get a chance to do what I love the most and that I'm still getting that opportunity. And for that, I'm really, really thankful.
Absolutely. I normally like to start these conversations off because, not everyone has the same kind of backstory and route that they took to get into the film industry, whether it's acting, directing, screenwriting, whatever the case may be. I make the joke that there's not like a how-to guidebook on how to get into the entertainment industry. So, what was it that made you want to go down this road of being an actress?
Well, I think I imbibed it from my mother, Shaukat Kafi, who was a very well known stage actress. And so I grew up actually knowing that this is what I would like to do. And when I was in college, I was winning all the acting awards and all the awards, etc. And then at one point, I decided that this is what I want to do most. And I remember uh, walking up to my father and saying, um, I want to become an actress. And are you going to be okay with that? And he said something so beautiful and so supportive. He said, Betty, I will support whatever you do. Even if you were to decide to become a cobbler, I would support that too. The only thing I would say is try to be the best cobbler in the business. And that was so heartwarming to me, that kind of support coming from my father. And it was really quite natural because I was about 4 months old when my mother would strap me on my back and take me for rehearsals at the Prithvi Theatre. And so I literally grew up with the paint, with the smell of grease paint in my nostrils, so to speak.
That's fantastic. And that's so important, especially when you're at that impressionable age where you're deciding what it is you want to do and to have that support system, especially those words from your father, which is, amazing to hear. That had to
Yeah.
be an invaluable, thing for you as you started your career.
Yes, absolutely. You see, my father was Kafi Azmi, a very well-known poet, lyricist, and writer. Till the time I was 9, we grew up in a commune of the Communist Party of India, which was basically a large flat with, 8 rooms in which 8 families were living, and 8 families shared just one bathroom and one toilet. So indeed, it was not easy. But I don't remember anything but pure joy when I look back upon my years in the commune, because there was such a sense of brotherhood amongst the various communist people who were living there. They were in different professions, but it was really like one large family. And what I grew up imbibing again by a process of osmosis is a sense of equality and gender justice, this was a given. It was really when I was about 19 years old that I got to learn that what I took for granted was actually very rare in society. I remember another incident when, I used to go to a convent school, and like all the other students in my class, I wanted a doll with blue eyes and blonde hair, because that was what all my classmates had. And my father brought a black doll to me. This is at the age of 7, imagine. And he told me then, Betty, black is beautiful too. And that stayed with me. Although at that moment I thought he was a bit queer, but these are things that got implanted in both my brother Baba and me. And along the way, we took the principles of secularism, composite culture, uh, all of that, it just came with everything else. So when I look at the world today, it is so different from the world that I grew up in. But I think that gave me a very solid base to become who I am today, I guess.
Well, I think also, in addition to your father, kind of implanting these beliefs and thoughts in you, it's the
Yeah.
fact that you took them, the right way and they stay with you today. Because it's not just, when someone teaches you, you have to still carry that
Yes.
knowledge and pass it on. So I think that's just as important as the actual lessons you learn from your father yourself.
But it wasn't as if my father used to sit me down and give lectures. It was just part of the process of growing up. And so there was nothing self conscious about him teaching my brother and me. It was just values that he shared with us as children. And I know that I was treated equally with my brother when that wasn't the norm in those days. And I took it completely for granted. And we used to celebrate all Indian festivals, although, as you know, communists were atheists and there was no mention of any religion in the house. But all the various festivals, which today are known as a Muslim festival and a Hindu festival and a Christian festival, all those things were just celebrated. And that became a kind of norm even after we shifted out of there. And so it was a sense of great uh, commonality, a cultural commonality that I really value the most in India.
That's fantastic. It sounds to me like your life story would make a great movie all in itself.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
that's fantastic. So mentioning, your dad was a poet and your mom would take you to rehearsals when you were, just a small child.
yes.
What was it like, growing up in that environment? Like it's almost like this career was calling out to you even from a young age. Do you think that's the case?
But it was two influences. One was my father's life, which was completely far removed from my mother's uh, life. And he was working amongst the laborers, and he was writing poetry to stir them and all that. And when my mother was working, then my father would, because we couldn't afford a maid, so my father would take me to these places. And I remember being thoroughly spoiled because I would move from shoulder to shoulder and there'd be lots of red flags. And I thought red flags mean party time. And so that was a great influence also. And on the other hand, it was my mother's life. So I don't remember being self conscious about it. But obviously, it was something that was deepening inside my heart as something that I would grow up to be.
Right. And it's interesting to hear the comparisons, with all the different conversations that I've had on the show where some grow up in a creative environment and some don't. And it's always interesting to see what it is that kind of lit that spark under them. So
Mm.
that's really cool. In addition to acting on film, you've also done some acting work on the stage as well.
Mhm.
Has your stage work helped your film career?
Yes, as it has helped me as an actor, because I think the ideal situation for an actor would be to work in film and theater and television, whatever medium there be, because you hone different skills and that makes you more rounded. I think although in my heart I believe that I am a cinema actor, because I was trained in acting at the Film Institute of India, and I passed out with a gold medal. And so that's what came naturally to me. It was much later um, when I decided that, all right, I should try my hand at theater too. And but it was again with people that I had grown up with. These were the IPTA workers and the Progressive Writers Association and people like that. So it seemed like quite a natural transition. But one of the things that I realized, that in theater, um, you have to do things differently, because being a cinema actor, I've learned to underplay emotion. I've learned to um, speak in a softer voice. And in theater, whatever it is you do, even if it's a whisper, that whisper has to be heard by the last person in the audience. So there are these different disciplines that are taking root inside you and only enriching you as an actor. But actually, being an actor is an everyday process. I still feel I'm learning acting because it's based on your connection with life. I would say that actors' biggest resource base is life itself, because you come with these notions that a performance means you have to do other things. But it actually has to come from the truth of the moment, captured by you, by your observation, by your concentration, by different things. But if you stay away from life, then I feel you don't get enriched as an actor, because that's where your learning ground actually is. People have notions of acting that, because I'm fond of a particular actor, then, oh, I should do this scene like that actor. So there is something that you expect which is almost imitative of the performance of somebody you admire. That will never work. Imitative work will never work. Yes, of course, you get your inspiration from people you value as actors and all of that. But unless you delve into the truth of the moment from within your own being and what the script offers you, you will never be a truthful actor. It will never really touch your heart. And when it touches your heart, then it comes forward as the truth of the moment. But it can't be another truth that I am counting upon. For instance, I can't, for an emotional memory, it's possible that I think of something in my life and I get into a state. But if I were to get into that state and do the present work, it won't be correct, because it has to be, you have to have enough uh, discipline to be able to tap your emotional memory and yet use it for the rehearsal period. But when you're actually acting, then it has to be from what the script offers you.
And I think that's beautifully said because you mentioning, a lot of people or a lot of actors will be like, "Oh, I'll do it like, we'll say
Meryl
Morgan
Streep.
Freeman or
Yeah,
more or Meryl Streep," but
yeah,
they're pulling from their emotional experiences. Those emotional
that's right.
experiences aren't yours.
That's right. That's absolutely bang on. And I always tell young aspiring actors that you have to learn to connect to life. Also, acting is something uh, that no other profession gives you, because it's a two-way growth. You learn from the characters you have played. Those characters become part of your experience, whom you would never have met had you not been an actor. And so, to enrich those parts that you're playing, it's very important that you expose yourself to all kinds of arts, to books, to painting, to music, and classical, and every other form, because at that point, maybe you don't understand the painting. At that point, maybe you don't understand the music, but exposure is, is something that you cannot value enough. And that exposure then enriches you as a person. So Shabana Azmi um, is enriched when she's playing Lakshmi, but Lakshmi is also being uh, benefiting from who Shabana Azmi has become in this process of being an actor. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. That's explained so well because that's what's so great about life is that it's your own experience. You put your own twist on the performance because you have to pull from what is you, and that's what makes acting so beautiful. And I've
Yes.
had the pleasure of being on a few film sets as a crew member and also directing a couple of my own. And it's
Yeah.
so fascinating to see the actors pull from, stories that, might be similar to something that happened to them in real life that they can use in the story that we're trying to tell.
Yes.
So, kind of going in a little bit of a different direction, for those that may not be familiar, because the majority of the listeners of this podcast are located in the United States, can you describe what the filmmaking scene in India is like?
Well, at present, it's a lot more disciplined. And because the corporates are coming in, and the corporate bodies insist that there is a script, that every day there's a breakdown of the scenes, and that all the actors are kept informed. Firstly, they have a script in their hands. In the times 50 years ago, there was no such thing as a written script. There was just a story. And you would get to work in 12 films at a time. It's unimaginable anywhere else in the world. So I would work from 7 to 2 on film A and 2 to 10 on film B.
That's
So
insane.
it's like, yeah, it's insane. It's like literally doing a job. And that cannot be a very pleasurable experience for any actor. But you get in the flow and you start doing it like that. But at the same time, this is, I'm talking about the mainstream cinema. But in what is known as the parallel cinema or the art cinema, constraints of budget made it mandatory that there was a script. You could digress from the script here or there during its making, but so you knew your character had a beginning, a middle, and an end. That was really much more due to budget constraints because you had to finish the film quickly. So, what would happen in mainstream cinema is that you would take 1 month to start filming and then 2 years to complete the film. Now, today, what has happened, and this is in Indian cinema as well as cinema abroad, that they'll take about 2 years in pre production and then 1 month, 3 months, 6 months of shooting, which is the way it should be, because all that time, all that effort should go into the pre production. So at the time of the filmmaking, you don't have to care about all these things, and everybody knows what they need to know. You have all the various heads of departments who know exactly what is required, and it just makes your job so much easier. So now it's more or less the norm that that before you go on set, you would get a complete script with the dialogue and all of that. It's completely different from the time I came in. Because you won't believe it that once I was working with Rajesh Khanna, who was a big superstar at that time, on a film where we were shooting the first page, not knowing what the second page was going to be. Because the
Wow.
second page was being written a distance away by a writer who was also an actor. And so, in between his shots, he would write those scenes and they would come to us. Like, it was absolutely crazy.
That's to use an analogy that we use over here, it sounds like the Wild West. It's just like not knowing what's coming next. Like that doesn't even sound feasible, but the fact that you did it is that's wow.
And then,
You've left me
we
speechless.
were doing lots and lots of films. The people who were popular were getting more and more work, and then a time came when that whole system was so disruptive that there was a ban put on actors saying that you can't work in more than 12 films at a time. I remember sharing that with John Schlesinger, who was making Madame Suzatska with Shirley MacLaine and myself in London. And he said, that has to be pure greed, because what other reason in the world would an actor want to do 12 films at the same time? I said, well, this is the norm. This is the norm. This is how it happened. Now, what has happened is because it's all changing, because there's a script, because actors have realized that it isn't fair to themselves or to their parts if they do more than one film at a time. And what that does is gives them the time to work upon themselves, to work upon their physiques, anything that is required, a skill that is required for the part. But otherwise, there were, for instance, I'll give you a very flippant example, that there were only two hairstyles that the hero ever used. One was if his hair would come almost like a fringe on his forehead, then he was playing a village bumpkin. If put uh, he pushed it all back and it was sleek, then you were playing an urban person. So, what we were doing at that time was really doing representative acting. This is acting, and this is what represents what you want. You follow. I mean, I'm sure it's impossible for the West to even understand what I'm saying. But that's how it was along the way. And then when things started changing with parallel cinema, then people, actors particularly, realized the value. Now, what parallel cinema needed from actors was to do films almost for free, or produce such a small amount that that would be less than the signing amount that you gave for a mainstream film. I came to the conclusion that, and this is in retrospect, not then, but in retrospect, I thought it was my way of using um, commercial success uh, as a way to help the parallel cinema movement beyond it just being a good performance. Because hopefully, if I become a star in the process of working in mainstream cinema, then my fans from the mainstream cinema might be tempted to come and see the parallel films because I'm working in them. But this couldn't happen unless you also gained commercial success. That was imperative.
And that's a very, forward thinking approach to that. I don't know that a lot of actors that, I know would necessarily think that, but I think, to kind of backtrack a little bit, uh, I can't stress the value of pre-production because I compare it to, say, building a house. And like
Absolutely.
the pre-production is the foundation. You have to have a strong foundation because the more prepared you are in pre-production, once you get to the actual filming, it's so much easier. Because I've been a part of films that didn't necessarily have the best pre-production, and that's one of my own, and
Yeah.
that was a huge lesson that I learned. So, but that's so impressive that you were shooting a scene of page one of the script while page two was being written.
What's
Like
being
I'm telling you,
written?
your story's got to be made into a movie. Like that would be so incredible to see on screen.
Yeah.
Uh,
And we took it in our stride. We just took it in our stride.
right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Mentioning mainstream cinema, I did want to ask you about this role specifically. You got to play the role of Admiral Parangosky in the Halo series.
Yeah.
So what? How did you find out about this role, and what was it that drew you to it?
No, my agent brought it to me. And amazingly, they didn't ask me uh, for an audition or anything. The role just came
Oh
to
wow.
me. Yeah, which is also very rare. And then I got to know that he'd been working with them for quite some time. And when everything was sorted, then it was brought to me. And of course, I said yes. Can you imagine what a huge leap forward it was for me? Because here was uh, Amblin production, Steven Spielberg's production, making the film. And then there was this character. And what I liked the most in Admiral Parangosky is, Asian actors have been saying for a very long time that why don't we have colorblind casting? Why is it that all the good roles must go to Caucasian actors, and Caucasian actors will be painted black and blue uh, to play Othello or any such thing, but it would not go to an actually black actor. Now, that you have to rise above your ethnicity. I cannot continue to be cast only because of my ethnicity. So it's not important at all. We should be given a chance with all the meaty roles, irrespective. irrespective of our ethnicity. Now, Hilo came with that to me, and that for me was the most comforting thing because I was playing Admiral Parangosky. I was not asked to change the color of my eyes. I wasn't asked to change the way I speak English. It was just the way I was. And it wasn't only with me, it was other actors. There were Korean actors in it, and there were English actors, and there were American actors, Canadian actors. And all of them were not cast because they were of a particular ethnicity. Then I wondered whether this was because it was such a fantasy world that we were uh, inheriting. But that I found very, very comforting. And that's one foot forward because when change happens, it must happen within the mainstream. Otherwise, you're teaching to the already converted. So when this happens, then hopefully more people get encouraged and they see, yes, uh, you have to look beyond ethnicity. And so that was one of the main things that drew me. I liked her character. I I went into it really expecting to have a great time, and I did.
And you know, I think what's so great about it, and you mentioning the colorblind casting, but I will say that as I was watching the show, because you know, I remember when the first Halo game was released, you know, and I'm a huge fan of that series, so I was really excited to see it translated onto the screen finally because it had been talked about for so long. The fact
Yeah.
that you know, like you were in a role of authority, that you had
Yes.
an African American actor in a role of authority. Then you had
Yes.
even one of the Spartans, you know, was an African American, and you mentioning English actors and Canadian
Yeah.
actors. It's what's so cool about it, and the fact that it was set in a you know in the far future. It's in space, so you have
Yeah.
this huge diversity of casting. And maybe it's the filmmaker in me that's saying that, but I personally love that aspect of the show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think so too. I think it works in favor of the show.
Yeah, 100%. But you said that you had a great experience in making it. Did you have any idea how popular Halo was once you started, you know, your role as Admiral
I
Parangosky?
I had no idea, except that when I told my nephew, who had never given me time of day, that I was going to be working in Halo, he looked at me with such open eyes, wide open eyes, and suddenly he felt, oh my God, so my aunt is worth something or the other. And then from all over the woodwork, people came out and said, oh my God, Halo, oh, Halo, 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 Halo. And then I heard all the echoes everywhere. I had not heard about the game. I had no idea till all this happened before I even started shooting.
That's great. You're just like, "Oh, now you wanna give me the time of day." Now that I'm so that's
Yes,
great.
yes.
Yeah, and it's, you know, despite the fact that it's a video game and people kind of frown upon it, video games sometimes, I think it tells a beautiful story in a
Mhm.
fantastical setting, so it was really, really cool to see it translated, you know, on screen. I think going the series route definitely worked in its favor because you could flesh out, you know, like your character, you could flesh out the character of Master Chief, you could flesh out all these other characters.
But there was such a huge debate of whether Master Chief should take off his helmet or not, his mask, whether he should take it off or not, because I believe in the game he doesn't. And
Mhm.
then they realized, but which actor would want to go through such an arduous time, so physically demanding, if their face is not going to be seen? And so finally they came to the conclusion that, all right, they would reveal his face. And then there were fans who said, this is such a letdown. And there were fans who said, "Oh my God, this is what we've been waiting for." So it was really a battle between the Halo fans.
Yeah, it's and you get that with a lot of, games or things that are adapted to the screen
Yeah.
because it's not gonna be exactly the same. I personally would have been shocked if he never took his helmet off. Yeah, he hasn't in
Mm.
the games, but that's a video game. That's not an
Yeah.
actor that's on
Yeah.
set for so many hours a day. So
Yes,
you
yes.
you gotta add layers to the character for a series. And not to
Absolutely.
discount the games, but it's different on screen.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
I personally wasn't surprised when that happened.
Hmm. Good. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's different than the games, but y people who are fans of it, like, you can't expect a straight adaptation of what happened in the games. Yeah, you can take elements of it, which you guys did,
Yeah.
but you gotta understand, and again, maybe that's because, I've worked in film, so I understand it,
Yeah.
but it's not gonna be exactly the same.
It shouldn't be, because if it is exactly the same, then what is this medium that you are using to tell it? After all, you're telling it in another medium. And so that medium must come into play also, not just to blindly copy what is happening in the game, because this is another medium and the medium demands certain things, and you must cater to that.
Yeah, it's like my wife, she's never played a second of the Halo games, but she loved the
Hmm.
show. So you
Oh, nice.
so, you've gotta understand that you're not just catering to the audience who's played the games. Like, you might just find a casual person that is scrolling through Paramount Plus and sees the trailer and is like, "Oh, this is interesting. I think I'll check it out."
Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what happened in large numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's next for you? Do you have any other projects in the works?
Lots of projects in India. In fact, I've been working round the clock. And so I've done, you see, I did two films in mainstream cinema, which were completely different from anything that I'd done before. And they became very successful. The audiences saw me in a role they hadn't seen for a long time. And then at the same time, I was playing humor, which is completely different part. And both of them came at the same time. And I think that created a big ripple. And so after that, I went into a web series. Then after that, I did another film. Then I'm just finishing uh, one more film. So it's been very, very packed.
Hey, but it's like my grandfather said, "It's better to be busy than bored." And it sounds like you definitely keep yourself busy.
It's what I enjoy doing the most.
Right.
It's what I enjoy doing the most. And so that I get an opportunity to do what I love most is wonderful.
Well, if you truly enjoy what you do, you don't look at it as work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you see, I understand that there are some limitations of age, and you have to embrace your age. There's no point in trying to look 20 years younger than you are by doing all kinds of things to your face. It doesn't work for me. I have to take the fact that there are enough interesting roles for people my age, not only in the West, but also in India, which is a new thing to happen in India.
One, you can also look at it as a challenge. You mentioning, you've been in the film industry for 50 years. You've gotten to play different roles because, you're saying you play different roles to embrace your age. Look at it as
Yeah.
a new challenge and an
Oh,
opportunity to
yes.
add a new layer to your acting ability.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And, do you have any we mentioned at the beginning that you're celebrating 50 years in the film industry. Are you doing anything special to celebrate that occasion?
Well, you see, I am coming to UK for the UK Asian Film Festival, where they're celebrating uh, this. Then after that, the next month I'll be going to New York, and they're showing a film of mine you might have heard of called Fire, which became a trail blazer because it took on the subject of same-sex relationships, which people thought would just be pulled down from the theaters, and indeed it was. When it was released, the film was released. Uh, it ran perfectly well for 3 or 4 days till suddenly a political party decided that it could be used for political gain. And so they sent a set of rowdy elements, and they tore some posters and they broke a few chairs and all that. And so the film had to be pulled out. But it is to the credit of the uh, Board of Film Certification, whom we mistakenly call the Censor Board. They sent the film right back to the theaters without making any cuts at all, which was a historic decision. And then I knew what would happen with the film. Even when I was doing it, I knew that not everybody would react in the same way to it because it's a relationship between two sisters in law in a middle class uh, house in Delhi. And so some people were outraged, some were angry, some were overwhelmed, some were extremely supportive and grateful. But what happened in the process is a process of questioning started. And once you ask why, then I think you start finding the answers. And that then has led to a lot of conversation. And even now, when I go to so many universities, I'm still called because it's been, in a sense, a path breaking film. This is Deepa Mehta's Fire. So I'm having a screening of that, then a conversation with the filmmaker Meera Nair. Then I'm going to Seattle, I'm going to Toronto, I'm going to Chicago. So the various things are planned there. And then, of course, in India in September, on the 24th of September, when it was the first film that I worked in was released.
That's fantastic. And you get to what's great is, you're going to all these different places that have, different people and different ways of life, because there I imagine there's I haven't been to Seattle, but I imagine there's a decent difference between Seattle and New York. So the fact that you're
Yeah,
getting to meet all these different people and, you know, talk with a new audience it's a really cool
yeah,
opportunity.
always, always. But I found Seattle's audience a very receptive audience. It came as a surprise to me because I've done a couple of plays uh, in Seattle. I mean, we took the play from India and went to Seattle. Then I've had a couple of appearances at different festivals with films of mine, and they've all been received very positively. But it's like I said, everything is a experience. Uh, whether you want to term it as a good experience or a bad one, it really depends on the way you're looking at it. But yes, of course, the audience in New York is completely different from the audience in Seattle, as will be the audience in Toronto, etc.
Right. And you brought up a great point too, because I heard this saying a long time ago, and I've carried it with me throughout the years, and that's life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I think, you echo that quite well. As we start to wrap up, what advice would you give to anyone who would say come up to you and say, I'm an admirer of your career. What advice would you give me to be an aspiring actor or actress?
I would say don't do it. Don't do it unless you want to do it so much And you're so passionate about it that you feel you'll die if you didn't do it, because that's what acting demands of you. You see, in the beginning, you are facing a, an everyday rejection of your work. You're sending auditions after auditions after auditions, waiting for that break, waiting for the break, and it might never even come your way. So it requires a lot of talent, because I feel that you can't really push talent beyond the point you can't push it down. Then also it requires consistent hard work, and it requires a lot of luck. So all these factors come into being, but you have to do it, and you cannot possibly imagine that you can learn acting in 3 months' time or 6 months' time. I'm still learning acting. And I remember, there are things my professor used to say uh, to me 50 years ago, which I didn't understand then. And suddenly I get a eureka moment in the middle of something that I'm saying, doing, and saying, oh, this is what he meant. This is what he meant. So it is a constant process of growth. Just because you fancy your face, or because you like your physique, or because you're a good dancer, sorry, that's not good enough for you to look for a career in acting. You have to do it more than anything in the world.
I think that's great advice. Do you have a website or a social media page that you'd like to promote so the listeners can follow you?
I have a Insta page, and I have a Twitter page, and I think it's Azmi Shabana. I'm not very sure exactly what it is, but yes, they're most welcome to follow me, and to whatever extent I can, I do try and answer personally myself, not just my manager.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll include a link to all your pages in the show description so people can follow you.
Thank you, Derek.
Wonderful. Well, Shabana, thank you so much for taking the time to have this chat with me. Congratulations on 50 years in the film industry. This has been an honor.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed talking with you a lot.